You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Hello again, everyone. This is Doug Thorpe, and you're listening to another episode of Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Today, we're going to take a walk down a different path than many that we've trod before, but we are going to talk about what it means to return fun to work and even think about it in terms of playing. And it's an interesting concept. And there's probably a couple of folks out there that have already hit the reject button and they've dialed away. Shame on them. They're going to miss a lot of great stuff. My guest today is a lady named Melissa Dinwiddie. Melissa, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Doug.
Tell us, while we're in the green room, you kind of helped me understand your background, but I loved what you said about your journey toward returning to some creativity. Tell everybody what that story sounds like and how you got to this conclusion.
Well, yeah, as I was sharing in the green room, so I spent 15 years as a professional artist. However, before that, I actually spent 15 years believing that I was a non-creative person. And as you know, many of us do. So many people believe that, I'm not creative. And then sort of ironically, I fell backwards into a career as a professional artist. However, while I was making my living from my art, which I got into because it turns out I really loved making things with my hands, I believed that I didn't have time to make things for the joy of it. I felt like everything I made had to be for a client, had to bring in money. And so it's drained the joy out of it. And I, was living the dream, as it were, making a living from my art. That's like the holy grail for artists, right? But I was really miserable. And I got really burned out. And eventually, this was around 2010, I realized something really had to change. And so I sort of sat down and I said, all right, I have to get back to making art for me, for the joy of it, for fun. And I figured out that the route back to that place was play. But I had forgotten how to play because I'd spent so long, making art to the specifications of my clients, being very meticulous and following directions. And so I am nothing if not a good rule follower. And so, I've always was good at school and stuff. And so I came up with a handful of rules for myself in order to get back into that mind space of being a little kid. And at the beginning, it was just maybe 4 rules. The first of which was there is no wrong. And this handful of rules that I developed for myself were designed to get me into that space of being a little kid playing in a sandbox. And over the next few years, these rules, as I called them, expanded into 10. I eventually called them guideposts because most creatives don't like rules. Yeah. And they ended up becoming the scaffolding for my book, The Creative Sandbox Way. And those guideposts, it turns out the reason they ended up becoming a book is I discovered that what worked for me to help me get creatively unstuck worked for other people as well. And I ended up sort of falling backwards into a second business, basically as a creativity instigator, a creativity coach. And so I went from professional artist to professional creativity instigator. And I did that for a number of years. And then eventually I pivoted to working with organizations, which is what I do now.
Wow. Well, again, I know there's probably folks listening right now thinking, gee, Doug, you don't understand. My work is intense. It's complex. It's hard to imagine being playful about it or having a mindset of play to ultimately to have fun. And yet I also, from time to time, I run across executives that in their 5-point strategy for the new year, they'll close with the idea of let's have some fun doing what we do. And I always question if that's a genuine statement of belief and hope, or if that's just they read it in another book somewhere and thought it's the right thing to say. fun, play, and work don't always ramp up in the or spin up in the same direction. And I think a lot of that, I mentioned this in the green room, I think a lot of that is probably stems from the programming we get in our young life about what work is supposed to be. Like, you're supposed to be serious, let's go get some stuff done. And it is sad. And I think the best organizations I've been a part of, there is a spirit of play there. People are having fun. They enjoy what they're doing. They enjoy each other. And there's a genuine camaraderie in that. And there's an extra gear of productivity that comes with it.
Absolutely. And you spoke to something that we're really steeped in here in North America, in the US, which is the Protestant work ethic, where we are so steeped in this culture of, if it's fun, it can't be work. It can't be serious. It can't be like important, right? It has to be, if you're having fun, there's something wrong with it.
Yeah. And
so that work and play are opposites, and we can't be having fun. It's not working if we're having fun. And I am here to preach against that. And as I always say, play is not the opposite of work. Play is actually how we make work more effective. We actually are going to be more effective if we're having fun. When we're having fun, we are more effective as humans. Think about how children learn. It's actually not just children, how human beings learn. We learn through play. That doesn't stop when we hit puberty. We actually learn through play. If you think about going to, whether you're in school or if you're at a conference, at a lecture, what do you remember? You remember the things that are funny. You remember the things that are meaningful to you. You remember the things that are engaging, right? You don't remember the boring things. Yeah. You remember the things that are that make you interested. That's basically the things that make you have fun. Those are the things that stick with you. That's how we learn as humans.
I love it. A couple of thoughts came through my mind as you were describing all that. Number one, I thought back on the great Robin Williams movie, Patch Adams, where he was a physician, but in classic Robin Williams shtick, this character, this physician, was a goofball. I mean, he was serious and he was very smart. And when he needed to really be on point with medical matters, he was right there. But everything else, getting there to and from that point, he was all about fun. He'd wear clown noses on his rounds through the hospital, and it really set the establishment on fire. They were just people wanted to fire him and throw him out of the building and all of that sort of thing. But the truth was he was a brilliant doctor, and it was just he had this other way of making it fun. And his whole premise was, if my patients have a level of joy, they're going to respond better to any treatment we're administering, and their healing is going to be faster if they can get away from the drama and the tragedy of what they might be, thinking about.
Exactly. Yes. Right.
Yeah. And the other thing I was thinking about is, again, going back to what you said about, developing good work habits by being open to play and explore things. And let's talk a little bit more about that. How does the notion of play to lead to fun, to lead to work output and productivity, how does that really come together from your experience?
Well, let me share with you. I have my Create the Impossible framework, which is a 3-step framework for leading to breakthroughs and innovations. And that's the area that I work in most primarily. I mean, I do work in general leadership development and team development, but my real hardcore area is in creativity and innovation. So my 3-step create the impossible framework is play hard is the first step, because we need to get into that mind space of being little kids. Being like letting yourself play in the I call it the creative sandbox. Embrace your inner 4-year-old and tinker, experiment. That is where new ideas are going to flow. So that's step number 1. Step 2, make crap.
Okay.
Why make crap? Because we need the crap to fertilize the good stuff. So this is, this is the path to discovery. This is like, we have spent our entire careers mastering displays of excellence, right? But if we want to create the impossible, we have to let that go. We have to let ourselves make things that suck in order to get it out there so we can eventually make things that don't suck. Because never let ourselves make things that suck. We're never going to get to the amazing things. And we have to start with the crappy things first and we're so used to like, no, everything has to be great. Everything has to be great. We have to let that go. So
well, let me jump in there on that one, if I can interrupt here. As you described that, I'm reminded there's a workshop facilitation tool that I've seen done, and I don't know what the official title of it is, but in classic workshop form, there's maybe 6 or 8 people at a table, and they're given this project. They've got some soda straws. I think there's tape involved, but the objective is to build a structure that will support a ping pong ball or tennis ball, some kind of thing. And what's interesting there, I don't know who introduced that originally, but they began doing some really serious studies. And what they determined was kids like under age 10 performed at that task way better than very high paid executives, very seasoned and learned and wise, business leaders. Those guys had struggled with it. And inevitably what the real kicker was, the adults in the room would spend too much time planning and evaluating before doing. And then they'd run out of time. There was a time clock on this exercise. They'd run out of time. And they may have not even built their first structure because they were still negotiating and talking about it. Kids, on the other hand, went immediately to task. Let's try it this way. Nope, didn't work. Okay, tear it down and do it again. And they would do like this iterative creation, and they would win every time.
I have read that too. Yes. And I have used that. The version that I know is use spaghetti, fried noodle, spaghetti. And they have a certain length of masking tape and marshmallow.
Okay. Yeah.
And you have to support the marshmallow at the top.
Same idea. Yeah.
20 pieces of spaghetti or something like that. It doesn't matter how, whatever. You can give people a certain number of pieces of anything and ask them to assemble them in whatever way. But it's, fragile sticks of something. And yes, the kids, it's like kindergartners always outperform the CEOs for exactly that reason, because they jump in and they try.
Well, they start planning and evaluating and critiquing the idea before they even see if it's going to work.
Right.
And it's one thing to have the idea and go do it. And if it does fail, I know there's a popular phrase in some business circles called failing fast. In other words, take your idea, take it to market and go and, intentionally see if it works. If it doesn't, kill it quickly, learn from it quickly and move on. And I had a gentleman on my show a few episodes ago. He had been an executive at Amazon for a number of years in the early days. And I asked him the question. I've heard it written or seen it written and heard it that Amazon was kind of the wizard of failing fast. Jeff Bezos, that supposedly was one of his credos. And this gentleman on my show said, no, that's not true. That's not how Jeff thought. What he did think about, let's learn fast. Let's do something. And if it doesn't work, let's really focus on the learning from it. What about the thing didn't work? Let's take that into account next time. Let's figure out the step to fix it. But they pretty much abhorred the idea of we're failing at something. It was, no, we're learning. And maybe that's a little semantical, but depending on where your head is, fail fast or learn fast is probably there's some differentiator there. But I think the idea is, don't be afraid to try. And if it doesn't work, back to the drawing board and do it over again.
Well, and that actually is step 3 of my Create the Impossible framework, is learn fast, which is turn every experience into a growth opportunity. Exactly that. And I liken it to playing a video game.
Mm-hmm.
The faster you learn from getting knocked out, the quicker you level up to face the big boss of innovation,
Yeah.
So exactly that.
A couple of episodes ago, I had A.B. Burke on my show, and he's an Air Force fighter pilot by experience. I think he's retired now from that, but he's got 2,700 to 3,000 hours in the cockpit. And similar to that, he talks a lot about the feedback loop and briefing and debriefing as you run missions. And in the business world, it would be, go do a project. Well, you brief in advance. What do you want to accomplish? What's the plan? Where are we going? And you debrief when it's over. What worked well? Where do we need to improve for the next time? What do we need to consider? And he said there's just this amazing power in the brief and debrief to capture that learning experience so that your next effort can be that much better.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that is a big part of what I do with my clients, for sure.
Yeah. We'll talk about the creative sandbox. You've got the book in the background there. Tell us more about what that means.
Yeah. So, going back to, this is around, oh my gosh, the early 20-teens. And here I was really wanting to get back to making art for the joy of it, and realizing that play was the key, and needing these rules to get back to play. And at one point I had gotten some advice from a coach to, well, why don't you try doing, making this type of art? And so I had gotten back, and I was getting back every day, and I was making some art, and I found myself avoiding my art table after a few weeks, and I couldn't figure out why. And at one point I was looking at the pieces that I was making, and I realized there was these brushstroke women, these figures that looked like women, but made out of just a few brushstrokes, very minimalist. Now, I had been having a lot of fun with them. They were like a female figure made out of just a couple of brushstrokes, and then I would add a word or two in calligraphy. The first one said, "A woman in love with her life is absolutely irresistible." That was the first one I'd come up with, and then I had made a few more, and then I started making these yoga posed figures, and I really enjoyed them. But then again, after a few weeks, I stopped. I was like, why can't I get myself to my drafting table, to my art table? And as I looked at these pieces, I realized these are just like doing work for a client. They're very, very designy. They're very planned out. I do 50 identical brushstrokes, and then I scan them in my scanner. I put them into Photoshop. I pick the best one and I manipulate them around. It feels like I'm working for a client. It's not this like messy, playful. I want to feel like I'm a little kid playing in a sandbox. And all of a sudden, I just got this light bulb over my head. Like, I want to be in a creative sandbox. That's what I need. And that was it. And so that metaphor, ever since that day, has been the core metaphor for my life. And when I decided to create a new business name, it became the name of my business and Creative Sandbox Solutions. And when I decided to write my book, it became the name of my book, The Creative Sandbox Way. And so that has just become this core metaphor for me. So I think about that a lot. I want to help other people be like a little kid playing in a sandbox. And that's how I want to be. And I talk about like carving out that sacred creative sandbox time and space where it's not about money. It's not about impressing people. It's not about winning awards. It's purely about letting your inner 4-year-old experiment and make messes and ask those what if questions. Like, what would happen if I did this? What would happen if I did that? And then when you leave the sandbox, it doesn't matter what happens with the stuff that you made in the sandbox. It's just a sandbox. It's all going to get, kicked around, and you're going to go in the sandbox another time.
Yeah. So let's fast forward then. Let's say a new business leader calls you and says, gee, Melissa, I need some help with my business. We feel stuck, we feel stagnant in where we're going. Where do you start with them? What are some of your first steps?
Well, I mean, the very first thing I do is I hop on a call with them and ask them a whole bunch of questions to find out exactly what's going on and if and how I can be of service. And then, we go from there. So everything is very, very personalized and customized. But the kinds of things that I would do might be, I might come in and maybe they need a keynote. Maybe they need some kind of inspirational, speaking presentation. That's one thing I can do. I might come in and give them a series of workshops to help give them some tools to help them, with their creativity and innovation. I might come in and help them with their communication. Innovation lies at the intersection of 3 things: connection, communication, and creativity. So typically, workshops and programs are around those 3 areas. If one of those things is broken, innovation's not happening.
So say those 3 things again.
Connection, communication, and creativity.
Okay.
Connection is going to happen in any kind of program or workshop I run. There's always going to be, connection is going to be baked in. I can't run a workshop that doesn't have a connection component. That's always going to be baked in. I do a lot of things around communication, helping teams communicate more effectively internally and also externally. There's a lot of cross-functional communication that needs to happen. I do a lot of work around that. And then a lot of work around creativity, how to think more creatively, how to, engage more creatively, so that breakthroughs and innovations happen more effectively. And just, so that the culture becomes a culture of creativity and innovation.
I'm thinking about several scenarios that I've been a part of. I've been asked to come in and do some coaching for various leadership teams, but I'm thinking about the organizations that are what I call sort of high science. Included in that is engineering and some of those disciplines. And those people tend to, and this is a horribly broad brushstroke, I'm getting ready to speak, but they tend to be a little more stoic, a little less personable. Not that they can't engage, but that's just their natural bent. And so as I sit here and I listen to sandbox ideas and being creative, I've had those individuals come back to me and say, Doug, we don't need creativity. We don't need empowerment. Our process is dialed in, and we don't want people on the front line moving that dial. They know what the setting on the dial needs to be. We got to leave it there. That's the only way this is going to work well. So they have this struggle of saying, well, what can I do to create fun or be creative? The nature of our work is just not that. It doesn't, it's not conducive for that sort of environment.
Yeah. And if, it's really up to the leadership. So if the leadership is not interested in what I have to offer, then they're not going to be, the right fit for me. But if leadership sees that there is, innovation is not happening to the level that they want, then they're going to be seeking me out.
Yeah. Well, definitely, even in the example I gave without naming names, I mean, even in their companies, there are dedicated teams that are supposed to be out innovating, exploring the market, getting feedback from clients and customers and bringing that back for innovation and iteration to determine what the next right thing is supposed to be. And I do tend, among those teams, I tend to see a little more openness to the whole notion of human fun and, let's be creative. Let's think about this in a different way. Let's not let the engineers bog us down. I will get to them in a minute, but let's work on the idea first. It's the curiosity factor and the what if. And don't move quick to judgment. You hear an idea, don't quickly say, "Oh, that'll never work." Potentially in the spectrum of things, there's always the outliers on the end that it's obvious it's not going to work. You actually tried it before, it failed horribly, but what's the next new idea?
Yeah, and that's one of the principles that I bring in. I come from the world of improv. As one of the tools that I use with companies. I bring in a lot of different tools, one of which is applied improvisation. And one of the foundational tools within improv is the concept of yes and, which is basically accepting ideas and building on them rather than dismissing them or shutting them down. So if somebody, offers an idea, it's like, oh, we did that before. That would be shutting it down or dismissing it. In improv terminology, blocking. Yeah. We don't do that. We just yes. How can we yes and that idea?
Right.
It's challenging, but when we work that muscle, and it's a constant challenge to continually work that muscle, and that is a skill. And when we develop that skill, the companies and the organizations and the teams and the leaders who work that skill on a regular, daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis are the more innovative, more competitive companies.
I love it. Yep. Well, very good. I tell you, we're about up on time for today. This has been very helpful, Melissa. Tell people the best way to get a hold of you if they're interested in knowing more about your work.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. You can find me at melissadinwiddie.com, and you can also find me on LinkedIn at Melissa Dinwiddie.
Very good. Well, folks, as always, we'll have those links in the show notes so you can rely on them instead of worrying about writing them down right now, but we'll get that to you. And one last time, thanks so much. This is really, I think it's an important reminder for people that if you're feeling stuck, whether it's personally or in your business, go see if you can have some fun, play around the idea, play with the idea. Don't just hard work the idea.
Absolutely. And Thanks so much for having me, Doug.
You bet. Well, folks, this is a part of the show. I like to remind you, we do have a video version of this over on YouTube, a channel by the same name, Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Hop over there, take a look at the archives, and leave us a comment, thumbs up, thumbs down, whichever your pleasure is. But with that, I'm going to tell you, go out there and make it a great day.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.